Welcome to another edition of Z-Files. Out on the road, we're at Crestview City Hall in the conference room. We're going to chat with another member of the elected officials of the city of Crestview. We've already interviewed the mayor, the city clerk, and several council members, and we now have a council member who I think we can honestly say literally grew up in city of Crestview government, indirectly or directly, so to speak. Shannon Hayes, welcome to the Z-Files.
Thank you.
And am I right, you kind of grew up in it with your daddy getting involved way back when?
I can't exactly remember the year, but he was involved in it for about 20 years or a little bit more. So I picked up a lot of things from him, in discussion with him, things that were going on in the city and why they do certain things. And he gave me an explanation of how he saw it and what he was trying to do for the city. And eventually, this was not my main interest in government when he became ill and asked me, did I want to see about completing the rest of his term. I told him no, I wasn't interested. But a few years later, I saw I thought that, in my opinion, the council was taking the city in the wrong direction, and I say, well, I can do that much. I think I can do just as well. So that's when I got in the political arena, and one of the reasons I got in there, I thought I could help our city because I care for our city a whole lot, and I try to implement things which I think are for the betterment of our citizens.
Right. And of course, growing up, did you get to spend much time? He had some pretty distinguished jobs in his career in the military, including being in the White House for, I think, part of his lifetime. Did your family travel with him much on any of those assignments he had?
Well, we traveled quite a bit with him throughout the years that he was in there. Now, I must have been a small child when he worked in the White House. I remember growing up in Alexandria, Virginia, which is right adjacent to D.C. Yeah. But for as going to the White House and meeting then President Eisenhower, I can't recall that.
Okay. You're younger enough, then you don't have to, you don't have to claim up to that. Well, of course, now that you are a council member and you've become involved especially with the League of Cities program, both within the county, North Florida, and within the state. Tell us what you do with that and what benefit you think that's been to you and your knowledge and benefit to the city.
Okay, well is our local league, the Okaloosa County League of Cities, which involves all the cities here in Okaloosa County. I sit on the board of directors for that, and we get together and look at things which we think affects the county as well as the cities. Just recently we made for a resolution for the half-cent sales tax, and so we supported that throughout all the cities, with the exception of Destin, I think. We got together and decided it would be in the best interest of all the cities that we could get on the referendum for the half-cent sales tax, so we pushed that. We also look at other things which might affect the county. We discussed the road situation, but knowing that we have no control over that, only thing we can do is go to our legislative body and continue to let them know our issues concerning that and see if they can get funds for our highways. So we all know the condition of those, and we wish that the city could do something about it, but we have no control over that State Highway 85 whatsoever.
Right. And really not technically over the expansion of P.J. Adams, although there's a possibility. You know that Senator Gaynor was just here, and he did have the money. It was in the budget, but the governor vetoed $1.7 million, so that would have extended Raspberry Road all the way across from about where Lowe's is out to Antioch Road, and that would be the beginning of the way to move traffic east and west and back on north, and then get eventually ways for people to get north and south without getting off 85. That's really the secret, is get the local traffic off of 85 like we've done on the Brookmead side.
Correct. And as people may or may not know, that P.J. Adams is not the city's highway either. So we have no control over that. That is a county highway. So the only thing that we as city officials can do is continue to press our commissioners, county commissioners, for assistance with getting that road completed. Well, started first and then completed. So we're continuously, I know I am continuously making reference to the highways, including P.J. Adams and others, ways. The bypass we know is something that might happen, but right now it's in limbo, so to speak. With the government involved in owning a portion of that and not wanting a bypass on their side of the property because they previously said that it affects their flight pattern. But it's possible that they might be able to start negotiating on that. Hopefully, we can get some type of relief from that. A bypass to the east or the west, we know it's very expensive and it's going to take time. So it's not, if it does happen, it's not going to happen overnight. We're talking years for that completion of that.
Well, it seems like some of the things that could happen is Raspberry Road being paved and connecting. Now the latest thing that the DOT brought to us, and I was really disappointed we barely had 100 people show up, yet 56,000 plus vehicles are on 85 every 24 hours. Saturdays, that gets up into the 60s because of the traffic going north during the tourist season. There's a lot of extra traffic on Saturday for people leaving the condos to go back north and the ones coming down to get into those condos on the beach. But still, the idea now of taking P.J. Adams 4-lane to just before Antioch School, turning north, crossing over what will become hopefully a new interchange on I-10.
Right.
And as I look at that, I can begin to see areas for things that could happen if that happens in the land that would be adjacent to that interchange and where the intersection with Raspberry Road would be. And then as that 4-lane continues working its way northeasterly to come out at Old Bethel Road. And we know that the TPO is approved, and it's somewhere way down the list, is the studies for a future 4-laning all the way around Old Bethel Road. You and I aren't going to be here to see that one open up, I don't think.
No, I don't think we're going to be that. And speaking of traffic, I had to go to Oglesby County Gas Board Board of Directors meeting yesterday evening, and going south about 5 o'clock. I noticed the traffic had sometimes been from Dukefield coming north sometimes.
Right.
But yesterday it probably was a half a mile or a mile past Dukefield.
Wow.
Traffic was backed up, and I was amazed at that. But we know as this Crestview continues to grow, if one family comes in here, normally that's going to add at least 2 more vehicles to the road. And Mr. Steele was saying that up just through August 17th this month here, there had been 33 people who had requested water service. So that's 33 more families that have come into town. If we keep on that pace, can you imagine the extra traffic? 2 cars per family minimum normally.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what it looks like now, what it's going to look like later. And we know the continued growth is going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know if it's going to maintain that pace, what it is, but we definitely know Crestview is growing. And we as a body of elected officials are steady pushing for some type of relief on that highway. But like I say, it's going to be a while, and we have no control over that except for going down petitioning our congressman in Tallahassee, letting them know about the issues. And we encourage our citizens to write your legislative body,
Right.
tell them what's going on, and if they keep getting hearing, they're working on it. But the extra push towards that by letting them know your concerns will benefit them to get in their ear. Whenever you get a chance to write them, talk to them, give them a phone call, let them know you're one of their constituents and that you want relief. Just keep calling them every day if you have to. But we definitely need some relief from the traffic situation here in Crestview.
Right. And of course, the real thing that people don't realize, the money for road repairs in the cities, in the counties, the states, and the federal government, there's only one source in most cases. We do have another source that's set aside now. They did create what we call a TIF district in North Okaloosa that's It got over $1 million now in the bank that's already built up toward just the PJ project. That's what that was dedicated to. So that's going to help a little bit. But still, it's only the gas tax, and it's not based on how many dollars you pay for gasoline. It's how many gallons you buy.
Right.
And as people drive more efficient vehicles that the government has required, the average person actually, it's only if they drive more miles are they going to contribute more to that gas fund. The only thing that makes the gas fund grow at smaller increments than it used to is more people, more vehicles. If it weren't for that, if it was just everybody paying, if the population and vehicles stood static and they all got more efficient, the gas tax revenues would have been going down, actually, mathematically.
And that's correct. And as you may or may not know, $1 million might sound like a lot of money, but when you're doing a highway, $1 million will do approximately 1 mile.
Yeah.
And that's not a lot of money when you're looking at the number of miles that you have to do for a bypass or for anything. So keep that in mind. $1 million doesn't do anything hardly for a highway. It won't even hardly do a mile of highway.
Right. Now let's talk about city government more, and particularly in your case, as you've been involved and some other council members do as well, the League of Cities program, and you talk to other city officials. Crestview has now got a charter review committee, and this is the second one since I've been in Crestview, and I know they've had the question go to the ballot many times, and the big challenge that we always at Crestview, and not only Crestview, but many of the cities, voter turnout just is not what it ought to be when it comes to whether it's city elections or referendums involving the city.
Correct. And as we might know from our last election, with a little bit over 3% of the population doing the elections, I talked with numerous officials down in Orlando when we were there for the League of Cities conference. As you know, I sit on the board of directors for the League of Cities for the whole state of Florida. And I get to talk to quite a few people from different places throughout. One thing that I noticed by talking with them, they weren't amazed by the low turnout, because that happens throughout the cities, all across the state of Florida. What amazed them was we don't have our form of government.
Yeah.
And I talked with quite a few people, and they said, "What? You don't?" And so they set out, and this was amazing to them. So I had some long conversations with some of them and told them what we were doing, but letting them know it's not the council who decides the form of government, it's the citizens. So the citizens, if they want to change or they want, if they like our government, it's form of government, it's up to them. But by talking with numerous people, they were surprised that we had the form of government we did.
Yeah, because I've got a list here somewhere of all of the other, here we go, from the League of Cities in Florida, how many different ones have which type of government. And there are, the strong mayor concept only in 49 of the 430 cities. And the strong mayor is either in the very biggest cities or
Right.
some of the real small ones.
Right.
There are some who have a structure of government, which I've been familiar with from covering the news, where each council member or alderman was really like a department head. And those are really very small towns usually, where it's like local hands-on, and they
Right.
can't afford to hire department heads.
Right.
So they get volunteer members who are elected to look after water and streets. But without a doubt, the majority of Florida cities of all sizes, it is a city manager, sometimes called administrator form of government, where one person does everybody who's hired and fired. There's one person responsible. The buck stops there, as a fellow named Truman used to say. And then they've got to answer to the council.
Right.
And then the structure. And I know in attending our charter review committee, and I think there's at least 2 more left. And the amazing thing is the general public very, very rarely is showing up for those meetings again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't attend them, but I do watch them being streamed, and we get to hear that. And I've noticed that I think the last meeting there was 2 citizens in the audience, and one made a comment, and plus we had the speaker, Dr. Gates, which gave, I thought, a great explanation of the form of government which they think we might have, but the citizens are the one who's going to decide what form of government Crestview has. And if they're not participating in it or not interested in it, then the status quo, in my opinion, is going to remain the same.
Right.
So encourage them to get out, become involved. Remember, they have to remember this is their city.
Right.
If they want changes, they're the ones who are going to have to request the changes and help make the city themselves. 5 people can't make a city. It needs all the public involved in making and creating the city that you want it to become.
Right. I know they've talked about the idea of doing a mail-out ballot, and recently we had a mail-out ballot that happened in Okaloosa County, actually North Okaloosa. Auburn Water has the supervisor of elections mail their ballot out to about roughly 10,000 customers, and they get an envelope. All they got to do is drop it in the mail with no postage paid necessary, and they only got about a 10% return. And they had 5 candidates for 2 positions on their board on that ballot.
That's true. So if the citizens aren't involved in that, then in my opinion, they have no reason to complain if they're not getting involved.
Right.
If you want change, remember 5 people that represent you cannot make all the changes.
Right.
We need your assistance. We need your input. We need your thoughts, so that when it comes time for us to make decisions, we're speaking for the citizens.
Right.
And not ourselves.
Right. Yeah. And we've got something over 10 or 12,000 eligible to vote in the city, and we get maybe 2 or 3 at the most on a big busy election when there's every race on the ballot is contested. So we'll see what happens, how this will be handled. But the charter committee, and this is a copy of the current charter, and it takes up a bunch of pages, and of course there's a lot of stuff that is still there that's from the old days, you might say, that just don't even, in many cases, state law has deleted what some cities have. That's a big challenge you see in the League of Cities, is the state government trying to usurp the authority of municipal governments in many areas.
Yes, and I sit on the committee for legislative committee and land and economic development committee is what I was on this year here. Mm-hmm. And we had 2 priorities that we're going to be submitting to our legislative body. One is home rule, which is the main thing that we're concerned about. As you may or may not know, there's been a big attack on home rule. And home rule basically says, let a city govern themselves. Our new president, Gil Ziffer, which we elected this year, his theme is going to be let cities work. Let the cities do their own thing. Where it was this past year, there was a great attack on home rule. The elected officials down in Tallahassee, 60 gentlemen on the Senate side, think that they can best tell us how to run our cities, which I'm against. And the League of Cities as a whole is really out to defend home rule. Because if you can't tell me, and you're 140 some miles from Crestview, how to run my city. So we're strongly against that. Also, the land use and economic development is standing strongly for CRA. Yeah. There's been an attack on CRA where they want to delete the CRAs. There was a thing in Miami that happened, that there was unscrupulous with the funds, but that was Miami that was doing that. That was not Crestview. I think we take great care of the CRA funds. But they're coming back again this year. We had representatives from legislative, and they were telling us some of the things they didn't get through this year. One being CRA. They're coming back again this year. So we're going to need our citizens to contact their representatives to let them know how they feel about it. We have great people here, and Congressman Mel Ponder, and Senator Gaynor, which are strong for defending our rights and everything. But there's a group down there, and as you might know, the northern end only has so many representatives there. The majority of the population is Central Florida down to South Florida.
Right.
So we can, but we're gonna have to contact some of them too, let them know
Right.
how we feel, because there's a big attack on home rules, CRA being one of those, and some other issues. But that was the committee that I sit on, land and use and development. So hopefully, it's gonna be a fight again.
Yeah.
But the League of Cities, they're fighting for the cities. So that Tallahassee has people who go and talk and to them on every issue that we send to them. I usually go down, talk to our congressman, our legislative body for the ones that represent us, and some that don't represent us per se. But I talk to them too and tell them how our citizens feel about the issues. So we need our citizens to push the issues that you think are right and strong for. The legislative body is going to be starting early this year, in January instead of March. They're already forming bills right now.
Oh, sure.
So you need to keep an eye on what the bills are and how they're going to affect you.
Yeah, I know that when I worked as staff in the legislature in the 70s, they had begun this, having monthly committee meetings all year long now, and to get bills and stuff processed. So you got to be paying attention early on for sure.
Right.
And of course, we also know that on the CRA situation, many of the county governments don't like CRA because some of that general fund money from the growth doesn't go to their general bank account. It goes into the CRA accounts, and that's where the other guys who want to do away with CRAs, and I know I've visited some in other cities and dealt with some CRA directors, most recently down in Panama City and area, and I have seen where the management, and when I got to looking at the list of some names on the different things, and I realized a whole lot of relatives were working and friends, were getting jobs, and they were getting lots of nice, pretty reports done, but nothing built.
Right.
And the object there is you get something built. Now, speaking of building something, this is a picture, and I'll put this up on the video so you can see it up closer. That big building right there is really growing up at the north end of Main Street, the Okaloosa County Courthouse. It looks a whole lot bigger than it did on paper, people tell me.
Oh yeah, it's I was there for the tree topping, and I got to see the structure from just the metal, but it's going to be a great asset to our city. It looks fantastic. Matter of fact, I was talking with a representative that I met down there in League of Cities.
Right.
Ajax is and I didn't know the name of the company. Yeah, I had ran over a piece of steel coming by there and bust my tire.
Oh.
So I put in a claim to Ajax, and it's been a couple of months, but I got a check in the mail a week or so ago, and it had Ajax. And I said, "Who's this company sending me a check?" Ajax. I didn't know the company, per se. So I went online to research them.
Right.
And you come to find out they're doing one of the fantastic builders for a lot of things. Even up in Georgia and Alabama, here in Florida, and their headquarters right out of the little Gretna.
Yeah.
That was surprising.
Yeah, right. Well, that beautiful courthouse. The last word I had is probably early fall.
Right.
Will be the opening of the Okaloosa County Courthouse, and of course the appearance of this one, thanks to really a lot of the urging from members of your Crestview Historic Preservation Board, and I am one of those proud members, that we convinced the commissioners that it needed to look a lot like the original style of courthouse. So if you look at a picture of the 2018, and I'll throw that on the screen after this for you folks, that original courthouse had 4 columns. This one's going to have, it looks like 12 columns. And you can already see the steel inner parts of where those are going to be. And you're going to be able to see that thing from coming in on Highway 90.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going to see it coming up Main Street from way coming up the street. It's going to stand out there. So in my mind, I say, well, once that tall building is there, maybe some other business venture people will build some other tall buildings, maybe even one that looks like this little one from Kennesaw, Georgia.
Okay.
Kennesaw is kind of a little town just northwest of Atlanta.
I'm familiar with it.
And I was up there it's not far from the New Brave Stadium. And so I stayed in a hotel near Kennesaw, and so I said, I'm going to ride up old Highway 41 and I'm going to go see the Big Chicken. Well, they've just finished remodeling the Big Chicken, Kentucky Fried Chicken in Marietta, $2 million worth. But this was a $20 million project. It opened for tenants in little downtown Kennesaw in December. 252 units. When I was there last month, there were only 2 units not rented.
Okay, and if you've been, and I'm sure you've been to Tallahassee's for
Oh, yeah,
some of their
they've
new
got
growth,
some there, yeah.
they have a concept like that too. And if you
Right.
go to every once in a while, I get to visit other cities and look at what they're doing for its downtown areas, and it's fantastic. You've probably been to St. Pete.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
they got a great area downtown
Yeah, I
there.
worked in
Where,
St. Pete back in the 90s, yeah.
well, they got a great downtown district there. Art center, living quarters, restaurants where people can sit outside, talk, and socialize.
Right.
So it's amazing what you can do with the city. But
Oh,
we have to
yeah.
realize too that it takes funds,
Oh, yeah.
and the city doesn't have funds to go in and revitalize. But as you were saying, that TIF fund for the CRA
Right.
helps along with those things, and hopefully
Yeah.
we'll continue to grow. We know we have a new director now,
Right.
and we're looking at great things from her. So hopefully and slowly we're going to see changes, hopefully downtown area.
That's right. In fact, this is the inside of the pool area. Many of the units have balconies looking into the pool, and I did a tour up there about 2 months ago and have video of that. That's a saltwater pool.
Okay.
It's easier to maintain and healthier to swim in, they tell us. And then also down in their town, right next to they started what the whole genesis of this project in Kennesaw, as they saw what their neighbor Woodstock had done 10 years ago. Just happens that this coming weekend I'll be in Atlanta from Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Got a Braves affiliates thing on Saturday. I'm taking a sharp young man from this town up there to the Sunday game, and then Monday he's going to go with me while I interview officials from Woodstock. They had an old street called West Main was called just Main Street, and a bunch of little stores and a railroad and a depot and things. They built another East Main Street and built a whole 3 blocks of high-rise apartment buildings, condos they look like, with businesses all the way across the bottom floor. When I was doing some video in Kennesaw on that first trip, a fellow walked up to me. I was out in front of the museum that's in Kennesaw, where they have the general, and they are actually part of the Smithsonian historical thing, because there was once a factory in Marietta that made steam trains before and after the war between the states. So once the world of steam trains ended, everything that was in that factory is now in that Smithsonian Museum in Kennesaw. You can literally see from step one and all the tools and dies and everything. So it's historical of the manufacture of steam trains. And also right down the street from it, there's a little place called the Frozen Cow. It's in an old antique house.
Right.
The Frozen Cow makes ice cream. Handmade. Really good. And there's several restaurants along the track side that look out over. They have a rooftop dining, and they're looking out over the tracks and into the depot park. So the $100,000 they spent of CRA dollars to redo their old depot.
Right.
Now on one corner of that land, on the private land, there's 38 townhomes being built. When I was up there last time, they were already breaking the ground for them at $250,000 each. So this project and the townhome project has just added about $30 million to their tax base of that town,
Right.
inside their historic district.
That's great, and that shows you, from what you demonstrated with your pictures, that the CRA can really help your community grow.
Right.
Blighted areas. We hopefully that somebody will come in here and do something for additional living quarters for our college-based students, which are here, because we know they're going to continue to increase and grow here, and we need housing for them. It's interesting that you spoke about the young man that you're going to be taking to Atlanta.
Yeah.
I've talked with Teresa concerning young people and a youth council. I spoke to her concerning this last year.
Right.
We're in the process of developing that, working with the school system, where we'll identify students who want to form a youth council, and they'll be advisory council to the city council. You know, sometimes we tend to neglect our younger generation, but we want to get them involved in this too. So if we can get this youth council going, which other cities did, matter of fact, Niceville won first place in one group, a category of youth councils. So they have a youth council down there. We have a gentleman on staff here who's worked with youth councils, and we're looking toward developing that. So look for that to happen soon, where our young high school students become involved in the political arena by having their own council, and they form their group. They get together and just learn about politics and how to present things to the council. We need all input from all different groups, all the way from the youth all the way to our age, Cal.
Yeah, you're right. Now, one of the things that I know since I've been in Crestview since 2003 now, but from time to time there's been talk we really need a recreation complex, a sportsplex that would attract traveling teams that like to go places like Niceville has a great program down there. I knew James Campbell when he was that was his job. Even before, back when he was just a shrimp fisherman in a city, and he worked with the recreation program. And recently I visited a city up in Alabama in my visiting other radio stations. You go visit governments, I go visit radio stations to get ideas. And a friend of mine has a group of stations out of Sylacauga, and one of his stations won the Alabama Radio Station of the Year award this year. But anyway, down the road, he's got a little one in Alexander City. Alexander City, Alabama is about 10,000 people. That is their sportsplex.
Okay.
Look at that.
That's great, and as you may or may not know, we're setting aside funds towards looking at a sports complex right now. We've looked at some land, and as we all know, we need a more sports complex for our citizens.
Right.
We have a large group of young people here, and as we know, a lot of them like to participate in sports, especially our football and our basketball. Soccer's becoming more popular, but we need that here for our young people.
Right.
And so I'm strongly in support of this. Right. As we all know, it takes money.
Right. I know that that's Highway 280, the Birmingham to Auburn Highway right there. But then I was staying at this hotel, and I made a wrong turn coming out for some reason, and I got down here and I saw this sign that said sports complex. So I drove back in there, and oh my gosh, on this beautiful road going in, they've got all of these older barns and houses from the early days of that county. One of them even has glass in it because it's got an old steam engine kind of archived, and there was a fire truck in there. But then they've got a horse arena back here. They've got a walking track. They've got softball, baseball tracks. They've got a senior's house. They've got gymnasium. They've got archery, tennis. They've got a big full-blown stadium that their high school uses, and big parking and everything for it. So it takes up hundreds of acres of land that somehow is right there at the edge of that town. Now, to build one, like you said, you got to have money for the land, and then money for everything that goes on it.
Right.
Suppose I could throw an idea out. The city owns a piece of land that it was once offered a little over $2 million for. I was at a council meeting when at that time the council was in discussion with the school board for them to buy the piece of land from the city that they could then put the two schools that eventually wound up out on the end of Redstone instead. Mm-hmm. And at that time the appraisal came in at something over $2 million. And then they decided it wasn't going to happen, and a lawyer that we all know stood up, and he's big in real estate. He's got a big thing going right now at the north end of town. Said, "I'll write a check for $2-something million for it right now." Well, okay, at that same meeting, there was a group of businessmen there who made a presentation on behalf of the fire department that they would build that fire station on Brookmead on a lease purchase deal. Mm-hmm. So when they left, I walked out and I said, "Gentlemen, let me ask you something. You heard a discussion of that other piece of land that had a $2 million plus value to it. Suppose somebody were to lease that for 99 years and build a building on it. That happens. Mm-hmm. In fact, where some of the new stuff at the north end is going, the land is being leased from the landowner, not being purchased. Right. Long-term lease. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, suppose the city had a piece of land, and here I'm showing you a picture of the land you own behind the Brookmead fire station, mm-hmm. and it goes down.
Right.
So I say, gosh, you could go in there and build a building and elevate it to the street level, and underneath it, you've already got parking, already excavated for parking, right? And you could have, with the hospital out there, and you keep seeing little individual medical offices popping up, because you already when you got stuff on the west side of 85 there, the big Redstone and that medical complex
Right.
there. Wouldn't a doctor much more prefer to have an office here where he didn't have to cross 85 to get to the hospital?
Mm-hmm.
And if you could lease, so I asked these leasing, I said, well, how much revenue could you generate over 100 years or 99 years versus selling it?
Mm-hmm.
Sell it for $2, you can get that $2 million every 10 years out of a lease, so that means $20 million out of 99 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, would you like to have a bank account with $20 million in it to build recreation from that you knew you could borrow against whenever you wanted, and hold the mortgage on the building or the first mortgage or secondary mortgage and still own the land, or just get $2 million, and then you don't, that $2 million would barely buy the piece of land, let alone build a recreation complex?
Right, right. And I'm familiar with the land. I haven't heard the idea what you just throw, but it sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Something investigating and looking into.
Yeah.
And if there's possible that we can do that, then I probably could support that. If I know it would be beneficial wherever it's located,
Yeah.
a sports center. But that's an interesting idea and something that we should look into.
Right. Well, as I look at it now from a big picture, to me, you lease this piece of land here, put that money in that lease into a bank account. If you needed to borrow against it, you could do that. Then you go out here, now where we're going to come across with this new overpass, hopefully, and Raspberry Road come across in here, and the city already owns some land down in that area, somewhere, and anywhere along Raspberry Road, visibility from the interstate is valuable to a sportsplex.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see more hotels being built up back in there behind Lowe's, and a sportsplex down in that general area that you'd be able to easily build and create and have a great operation with the revenue from the income out of leasing off that land to some big developer. So one of my chores I'm going to do, some real estate folks, got to find a developer who's got some vision, who could see how he could build, or they could build a medical complex back here, adjacent to that hospital, and other offices, whatever would go in that area, because you would have plenty of room for parking below it, a nice, great big building going back in here, multi-story thing, and guess what? There's a fire station right next door to it. Pretty safe place to be.
Yeah, well, that's, like I said, that's an interesting concept, and I'd be interested in looking more into it and learning more about that. So hopefully we can and start investigating that and looking at that possibility.
Yeah.
One thing that we always have to consider too is that traffic. We definitely got to have some way to get the people in and out of there.
Right.
So before we do that, we got to get a highway down there to get the people to that place. If you decide to do that.
Yeah. Fortunately, the Brookmead project does, and many people do. I use it quite a bit now. You can get on there at Walmart, go back behind, and
Right.
you go all the way to Highway 90.
Right.
Several ways to get to 90 without air, or even get downtown and come underneath the overpass on the east side of 85, and never touch 85 after you leave behind Walmart or that second place by the motel. Either way, you can go back, get on Brookmead, and fortunately through that thing that Wayne Steele and the city did back here a few years ago.
Right, and as you know, over behind Orion's,
Yeah.
where they're building the new hotel there, I talked with one of the investors a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about that, and I was asking them about, they're building more hotels. He said, yeah, there's a need where you can see where people are stopping here now.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, they can get up in the morning and drive down to the south end in 30, 40 minutes or whatever. Down there, we know it's super congested on 98. They're working on proposed plans for 4-lane in 98. But I asked him also about had they considered looking at this land since he was an investor, and he said they had. The only issue they mainly had with that was there's wetland down there, and the amount of field dirt it would take to build that up down there. But they had looked at it and considered
There's
that.
an issue about the mineral rights under that ground that has to be dealt with too.
Well, yes, but we have one company that's looked at it previous and still haven't said they haven't given up.
Okay,
That's not
good.
concerned about their mineral rights. One company investors were concerned about the mineral rights,
Yeah,
but this one, as I recall, out of Louisiana,
yeah.
they weren't concerned about the mineral rights. So those issues, it's a long process. People think that you can do things overnight.
Yeah.
They think that you can tell businesses where to go. We all know businesses determine where they want to go. They know more about the land and the town probably than you do.
And the
'Cause
population and where
they've
they're
spent a ton of money on researching and investing. They ask anything, well, how's your community? They not only look at that part, they look at how your community, what's your salary range, what customer would probably go shop here, or what customer would shop there. As we know, some people had wanted a mall down there. Well, if you know now, malls are a dying breed.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to go to a mall now. It's more the shops and things like in Destin and everything. So the mall concept, people can forget.
Yeah.
They're never going to bring a mall.
No,
A lot of
it's-
malls are closing right now.
It's like the town center complex, like
Correct.
what Kennesaw and Woodstock have done, and Suwanee and other places are. You have kind of like like Destin Common, the
Right,
Destin's is, and then you have residential all around it. And you'll see when I bring the video back from Woodstock after this weekend's trip. There, how many homes were built, townhomes and houses, on the backside of the new East Main Street they created. And when I walked around in that with my lady, and she started looking at the ones that had for sale and checking them on the little phone app, 400, 500, 700, 800,000 dollars. So I'm going to get the dollar value. How much taxable value was added to that town,
Yeah, and if
and the population to shop in all those shops right on that new street.
correct. I don't know if you've ever been to Columbia, South Carolina area, but up there on their concept, they build the stores, and right there where the stores are, they're building condominiums right there in the
Right.
same complex. So really, you can walk out your door and probably walk into a store if you want to.
Right.
So that's one of the new concepts, and it's not new, but
Yeah.
things are going. We're finding that young people like to live where they work.
Right.
They don't care that much about cars that much. They want restaurants where they can walk out of their complex and walk right into a restaurant down the block or so, meet their friends and things like that. So that's the new millennium thinks a little bit different than we do.
Right.
But we have to realize that they're the working generation. They're the ones that have disposable income if they watch their money, and they don't mind going to a restaurant to eat. They don't cook, whether you believe it or not. They microwave it or they go out and get it. And a lot of them go out and get it, and they like to socialize and meet with them. This new generation, they don't read the newspaper.
Right.
They're electronic book.
Right. Yeah.
If you put it on something where they can just get their phone, grab it out, and read it. So
Yeah.
we have, as a city, have to make sure we reach them.
Right.
The social media is one of the biggest things out right now, and our generation might not be in the social media like the other ones,
Right.
but the young generation, if it's not on social media where they can pull their phones out or iPads,
Yeah.
they're never going to read it.
Well, again, this apartment complex in Kennesaw, on the backside there's a 660 unit parking deck garage, which is a co-project with the city. So half of it's used for general public parking, half of it's used for the tenants to park in. And they've also done a project in this town of working with business owners who have parking that's not being used all the time, where it can be a shared thing with the general public to park, because what they're after is this project. In the article that I quote the mayor from, Livable Centers Initiative.
Right.
Residential density downtown. Now, I know that the zoning that's about to come before the council, there's a lot of detail work that Teresa's staff's having to do, is to rezone at one time all of that C1 to the new zoning, where right now you've got to either be the owner or manager to live above or behind your business in Crestview. A few of the business owners, like Cosmo, went ahead and did their zoning themselves, but I remember when Main Street pushed and the CRA did, and everything went through, the land use plan is done. It's when they finally get the zoning so that you can put the legal notices out and have the hearings. And then there's going to be zoning for 3,000 people, where the numbers that Eric Davis had on those plans will be able to live within about a 5-block area from the courthouse. That's 3,000 people could live and shop and eat in a thriving downtown Crestview.
Yeah, and as we may know that if somebody comes in and develop housing for the students which are here,
Right.
and the other citizens, they're going to have somewhere to go.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to have where some eat. So that eat and everything. So that creates more restaurants for them, more places for them to socialize. And Crestview has great potential with that. We know there's some things have been said about overpricing of the land or the buildings down there. I don't have anything to do with that or not. A citizen determines what his property is worth, and if it's fair, then it's fair. And the developers know that. If it's not fair, they're not going to come here. They're going to look for somewhere else. So we have to be concerned about is the fair market value for the places which are down there. But there's great potential, as we know, about the land that's behind our city hall, a dilapidated area,
Yeah.
which I think if an investor decides to come in and buy all that property up there and develop that, that could be a great asset to the city. And we'd have so many people come down here, Cal, that we'd have to try to find more places for them to park.
That'll be the challenge as well. Shannon, we appreciate your time. I think you and I can agree. We can see we are a bedroom community. We are a place. We've got a lot of, but we've also got jobs coming to this area. And who knows one day what's going to happen out east of Crestview and all that big land out there with jobs that could maybe be out on that land. And they're going to want to live. And I know I live at the north end up off Old Bethel, and I keep seeing new signs for more subdivisions being built,
Right.
going out 85. And going out Airport Road and all that. D.R. Horton's building stuff out there around Airport Road and Auburn Road, as they call it. So the people are coming. We don't have to build it. They're coming. And, you know, now there already is on the books zoning and annexation done for 3,000 more units between the Winn-Dixie Publix corner and going all the way around to the Old Bethel Cemetery corner. And that's going to happen, and you're going to be building a fire station out there in the next 5 years, I'll bet you.
And that's why we went ahead and purchased land. We've already purchased land for a fire department to go out there.
Yeah.
We know that that's going to be one of the next growth areas, and to make it safe and keep the insurance down for the homeowners, the closer you are to a fire department within a certain miles, it's going to determine what your insurance rate are. So we've anticipated that growth area out there, and already purchased the land. And when the time to build a fire department, the land's already purchased, and all we have to do is get the funds to build a fire department out there. Right. So one thing, Cal, that we know, that I know from talking with people down, especially Central Florida and further down, and some of the other smaller areas, Florida's the choice place to come to. One of the 2 or 3 states that are a choice. As we know, Central Florida and South Florida has been continuously growing and growing. If you go down that way sometime, they got the same traffic problems that we got. They're worse. One thing they have is they got higher property value. You know, and here in Crestview, about 20% of our citizens, approximately somewhere there, don't pay any tax.
Right.
So we don't have the big high dollar property that they have down there, where, you know, like in Destin, 1 mil generates $4 million and or $6 million, and so they can afford that low percentage for the taxpayers.
Number, yeah.
But ours isn't like that. You know, just unfortunately that we have a lot of property that's been here since the 30s, the 40s, the 50s. They'll have a high dollar value. So we don't have all that extra funds to do things as fast as some other cities would, like a Destin or a Fort Wallen Beach, where they have that waterfront property.
Yeah.
You know, we're landlocked, but so it takes longer for us to do that, and we definitely don't want to put a burden of high millage rate on our citizens to try to get a few things done.
Yeah.
So it takes time. It's a slow process. People think things can happen overnight, but it just doesn't happen that way. And I encourage our people to become involved in political arena. What's going on in your city? I see things on Facebook from time to time. They're erroneous statements, some of them, and they're not aware of what's going on. So I would advise them to, when you have concerns or questions, come to your city. Come to your city councilman, your city staff, and find out why you're doing this, or is this correct, or is this not correct. Some people might not be aware of that. I've been seeing where there's been a comment about the Studer Group. Yeah. Well, there's some things that they're not aware of. I talked with the gentleman from Mason-Dixon when they were here. People might not be aware that they wanted to, in their plan, along with that study, they wanted to take over the city. They were going to put one of their consultants, they want the mayor, and they wanted one councilman to form a temporary form of government. They would run the city. Well, I was against that. But the thing was, people might not be aware of, they wanted over $100 and some thousand for that process. The study was free, but the consultation and running your city for them was well over 100,000. People aren't aware of some of those things. So I would say find out what's really going on with some of the things like that, and then you'd be able to discuss it intelligently.
Well, we can talk lots and lots if we wanted to here, Shannon. But anyway, the whole point of it is, of course, of the Z. By the way, this is a special program. I began the interviews with Ken Nielsen, and we called it the Saturday Special, in January of 2009. And I look back, and brand new County Commissioner Wayne Harris was the guest on the first interview, and that's when Kenny was just starting Crestview Community Television. And within a week or two, Mr. Whitaker agreed that I could put the audio on Saturday mornings on the radio, because Monday through Friday we got the trading post and all of that stuff in that time block. And so we called it the Saturday Special, and the tagline was, "We shoot straight." Okay. And then somewhere after a couple of years, Ken Nielsen found what we call the font. That's the part that your little letters are called fonts. And he found the font for the old TV show, The X-Files. And so he made me a logo up with the white letters Z-Z, Cal Z, W-A-A-Z, the Z Files. So this is broadcast number 450. At one a week for 52 weeks a year. And so we got another whole year ago to hit that 500. So we thank you for being on it.